Welcome to Neuroconference. Episode 8. Building bridges.
All right, cool. So here we are again for episode, what is this? This is 8 now, right? Episode 8? I think so. I'm pretty sure this.
Yeah, I think 8. So, yeah.
And our guest today is Wanda Stewart from Oakland. Thank you very, very, very much for being with us today, Wanda. I've been following Wanda for a while, just paying attention to people in Oakland who have a lot of really good things to say, who are doing a lot of good things as far as conversations around community organizing are concerned. I'll throw the word revolution in there because that looks like a lot of different things. I know, no, that can seem like a high bar, but I stand by it. And then recently, and I just wanted to, this is an immediate plug. You just started putting out a YouTube channel called Mama Wanda's Gardening School, right?
Mama Wanda's Garden School.
Yeah, and we'll have links in this episode. We're going to make sure we got plenty of links taking folks to that. And if I'm not mistaken, your work in this content generation is an extension of work you've been doing at large around permaculture, correct?
Yes. I think once you start doing permaculture, you can have a permaculture interpretation in every facet of your life.
I love it already.
Using those 12 principles. Mm-hmm. But a lot of that is also directly my work out of school garden and community gardens, where we were trying to specifically reach out to and educate kids, but also help teachers bridge their work in the classroom to outside learning, right?
Beautiful.
And so forth.
Beautiful. I want to just make a little note here that when I was tossing around potential topics, given the broadness of what could be talked about in this conversation, with someone who has so much to offer in at least a conversational sense here, the topic of building bridges as a topic was popping out to me. So I was wondering if I could have permission to throw it out to the group for that kind of to be the topic of this podcast, is building bridges. How does that sound?
I think that's great.
Rad.
That's
cool.
Wonderful. You're diving right into Wanda's psychology too.
Glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that. Well, let me ask you then, from your experience, what does building bridges and community mean to you?
I mean it so literally. I actually probably when I first started having a resume, which is more than 40 years ago for sure, I used the word bridge worker. And I even thought it was a little bit presumptuous, but it expressed who I believe I am. And I'd even hazard to say one of my purposes. And I try not to be haughty or inflated or about ego in that, and just see it as a position to be played. So for me, it's a bridge builder, certainly between cultures and among demographics. And some of it is about who I am relative to the poles on either side of those factions where we need a bridge across, right? But once you become an able bridge worker, in who you are, it's just what you do, right? And even if you can't understand the exact perspective you're dealing with, you know how to get folks to walk to the center. So that, I think I like being a centrist. I think it is an appropriate position to be. And we can't all be that, but the more we coalesce around a shared pole on how we love one another, for instance, right? We
Right.
can have a bridge.
Right. That I would imagine that the skill set within that
Yeah.
is specifically you use the word loving each other, which I'm really into. And that conversation, I mean, is a huge one because that looks different for different people, right? I've been so like the concept of understanding how to learn and translate love languages.
Mm-hmm.
I wager is a skill set in there. Knowing that when you're dealing with polarities where building bridges is necessary, not just because, building bridges is fun, but because like we have to build bridges because
Right.
there's stakes involved.
Right. Oh, and it's complicated work. I
Right.
mean, I drive across the Golden Gate Bridge and the Bay Bridge all the time. And, like that's not easily done.
No, massive work.
Right.
Right.
So, okay, I'm going to tell you a joke. And this is a joke that was told to me by a person from Marin County, which is, known to be sort of, in their own minds at least, very liberal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Democratic voting, if not, but also rather wealthy and privileged, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes in mind-boggling ways. So I was, and then I'll tell you about my particular skill set.
Mm-hmm.
I have been the director of admissions and diversity in several schools, and most particularly private schools.
Mm.
And one of which was in Marin. And the headmaster wanted me to understand what I was getting myself into in terms of the cultural bridge building.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I'm going to tell you a joke that the white people tell in Marin County. Maybe they don't anymore. This was 15 years ago for sure. And he said, did you know that the San Rafael Bridge is the longest bridge in the entire world, right? And that's a bridge that goes from Marin County to Richmond, California,
Mm-hmm.
where, it's hard living and very black and brown, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know that bridge is the longest bridge in the world, which it couldn't begin to be?
Right.
And I go, what do you mean? He goes, sure. Do you know any other bridge that spans across continents from the North America to Africa?
Mm.
Right.
Hmm.
And I thought that was mostly a funny joke.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw the embarrassment when I was able to tell that joke in a bunch of people who were from Marin.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I went, oh, wow. Okay. That's not just a fact for them. So learning how to navigate that crazy expanse,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
My life has been such that I believe I was trained for this work by virtue of my particular individual experience. Hello, true for all of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
But I am old enough that I was in the very first wave of busing in the desegregation of public schools.
Wow.
So when I was in the third grade, I started being bused to an all Jewish school.
Mm.
That literally was less than 5 minutes from my house. But in Philly, things are very clear by neighborhood, right?
Mm.
So I went from being a black kid in a very middle class black neighborhood, right? But everybody's black in the classroom, many of the teachers as well,
Mm-hmm.
to an all Jewish school where there were 6 black kids and, 30 Jewish kids and one poor Gentile named Frank Scott. No.
Poor
Frank
lonely
Smith.
boy.
Frank Smith, right? Because everybody else was Silverberg and
Yep.
Krausman, right? It was us, Frank Smith, and all the Jewish kids. But by being immersed like that, and then I did that for 4 years. Then I got a scholarship to a very prestigious blue blood, top of the hill prep school.
Mm-hmm.
That was all girls.
Mm.
And I was in my graduating class, I was one of 4 black students, right?
Wow.
And, I went to school with people whose houses were deconstructed castles from Scotland, transported and reconstructed outside of Philadelphia.
Hold on. What?
Right?
I got to wrap my head around this.
Right.
You went to
They lived in a castle. They lived and by the way, this family has had a part to play in every pill you've probably ever swallowed, right?
So
They were Scottish.
The rich white people around you actually literally lived in castles.
Yeah. Well, wait, not just a castle,
Scotland.
because you can find some big houses in Philly, right? They don't
Okay.
even necessarily cost a lot, especially if you lived in California. There are some big old stone mansions, but their house had been, so they were Scottish.
Mm-hmm.
They bought a castle in Scotland,
Damn.
took it apart, transported it. I don't know how you do it. Don't ask me that. Transported it to Philly, reconstructed it, right?
Wow.
And I will tell you, interesting. So I went there in 7th grade. There'd never been a Black and not brown person living as brown in that class until me and the other Black girl got there in 7th grade. And the young woman with the castle there invited me to dinner, right?
Wow.
And it was only maybe a 10, 15-minute drive from my house, not even.
Mm-hmm.
And I got there and there was a guard at the gate. Like you went in a driveway and you still had about another almost half mile to get to the house.
Wow.
Right. And then you come to this beautiful castle and there's a guy at the gate and my father is like, holy shit. It isn't saying anything to me because like they put me at the school because, I have arrived. I'm at this like blue blood thing and I'm a scholarship kid and all this. And I go into the house and there's a Black woman in a maid's outfit. And I had never,
wow.
I mean, the people around me didn't. And again, I was from a very middle class background, but we still didn't see maids, and particularly maids that were in uniforms answering the door. So, and she is as shocked to see me as I am to see her. And I go, hi, I'm here to see Jody.
Scrooge McDuck.
And she said, oh, you're here to see Miss Jody. And this lady in my mind was like my grandmother, right?
Mm.
She called this young 13-year-old Miss. She said, I'll go get Miss Jody, right? And then Jody comes down and she literally was like, thank you, Annie. And I was like, right? Talk about culture change. The last thing on that night, they gave part of dinner. The only part of dinner I remember were the string beans. Okay. And the reason was because they were just, it's how I eat them now, gently steamed, right? Mm-hmm. But in my culture, they come cooked within an inch of its useful life with ham hocks in it, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, they are trying to kill me to get me to eat these beans like this up in here. But, and her graduation party was a whole nother off the hook thing. But I say all this to say, in being immersed, right? I became not only just to know who I am personally and culturally, but who I am relative to the left and the right and the further closer, right? And then when I moved from the from the East Coast in Philly to the South, I started out at Duke University. I learned about the South, right? Up close. And then I got up, I couldn't really do the South. I was going to get myself killed as a big mouth Philadelphian, right? Then I come back and then I start moving west. And you find a different thing in Arizona, right? And now I know me relative to Native Americans and Mexican people. I know how funny this statement is when somebody asks me, what do I miss about Philadelphia? And I go, the Puerto Ricans, right? And they go, but you got Mexicans, don't you? Oh my God, right? Those are like not the same people, y'all, right?
Yeah, that's a little awkward.
Then knowing the rich, right? And working as a social worker in the extreme poor, right? And knowing the strength that the extreme poor have in their experience. And I got to say, I have helped educate at least one child of a highly known political figure, right? Sitting up in the White House. And there's a lot of challenges. I mean, I can go on and on about the problems of privilege. I worked in boarding schools.
Yeah.
So I also got to see a lot of fame, and I know a lot of famous people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the pain is hard, right? And so being a bridge burner, bridge burner. I don't do that. I take that very seriously.
Yeah.
Right. The bridge, and I just burnt a bridge that I didn't burnt it, but I certainly deconstructed it because you can't let hate in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even if you love the person, you just can't. But the bridge builder thing is about practice and understanding yourself relative to the other people, and then helping them to understand each other, right? So, I have been known to say to white people, yo, I know y'all think I'm the tough talking black chick. Actually, I'm the nice one here to help, right? Because I'm not there's people behind me that feel some extreme kinds of ways.
Right.
Let's talk, right?
Yeah.
And have risked having to turn in my black card on many, 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 many occasions in trying to help communicate and explain the perspective of white folks, which is a broadly false category, but anyway. So it's practice.
Right.
Right. It's being open to the perspective of others.
Right.
Knowing that your perspective is never an absolute truth. Right.
Yeah.
The bridge is a two-way.
The bridge is and the mutual thing. So the bridge is a two-way street. And I don't care how sorry we feel for you. So like right now we started all of this food recovery. And let me just stop and go. I don't really believe in feeling sorry for people. That has never really helped people. Right.
Yeah.
But we've been doing all this food recovery. And some of it is getting it to, in Oakland, we got an encampment that's got approaching 400 people living and organized under a freeway, right?
Where is that?
Under 880 Wood Street. You know where the West Oakland train station is?
Oh, yes, I do. Yeah.
Right. Deep all in there under the spaghetti of 880 and
so if you're on the BART if you're on the BART headed towards San Francisco from West Oakland, it's underneath you as you're going there.
Correct.
Got it.
Correct. Got it. Although it's a little in from the BART track, but yeah, to the point where it's scary. I mean, you're looking up, you're down there. I'm at parties, you're at picnics, you're doing all this stuff, but the freeway is over top of you. I'll tell you where it is. It's the freeway. Remember when the Bay Bridge broke in the earthquake? Right there. Right. So the folks that are living there have perpetually whatever's raining down on them because it's going across the bridge and all those motors and particulates and all of that. And they have to live with whatever else deals.
Yeah.
Right? But in doing that work, we're also working to bring those folks along and helping us to get the food, right? Or what can you do for the community over here? Because the mutuality, I think, and the exercising of that muscle is essential, right? That give and take, right? Well, 50% of us got to practice receiving if the other 50% are practicing giving, right?
Yeah.
So, people will go, oh, no, there's other people that need this food more than me. I was like, you know what? Can you just take the love and not block it?
That's a lesson right there.
Don't block the flow.
That is a lesson right there. True. Learning how to receive is difficult.
Learning how to receive.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially when people really are so earnestly wanting to help each other. It can seem counterintuitive, especially if you're someone who comes from privilege as well, right?
That's right. That's right.
So it's really complicated.
Absolutely.
What are some consistent, let's just say you were talking to someone who's brand new to any conversation like this. What are some practices that are accessible that you find that might help build commonality around any potential patterns of newness around people trying to reach out and build bridges, which is happening a lot right now. And there's a lot of gnarly, messed up stuff happening, but there's also a lot of really incredible new sharing happening in ways that is very cross-pollinating, you know? So I was wondering, like, you've clearly walked a wide spectrum of life. So, learning how to receive, we could put that up there on the tally of things you're putting forth. What's another tool set that you think is helpful with that?
Well, this food recovery thing again. So technically I live in Berkeley, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I live in a 1,000 square foot house. And that's only because I renovated the garage, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that cost $320,000, which sounded like a zillion to me in 2004.
Mm-hmm.
And if I wanted to sell it tomorrow, I could probably get $1.5 million.
Nice.
Oh, nice.
Wow.
Yeah, but that's that gentrifying thing.
Yep.
Right?
Mm.
But I say all that to say who now lives in my neighborhood. It used to be the hood. It ain't the hood anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And there's been a lot of talking and the love being spread because everybody's out hiking and exercising and so forth. So often I'm giving this food out right in front of my house to anybody walking by. Mm-hmm. And we have somebody will go, Wanda, just give them the guilty white people speech, right? And it goes something like this. 1, accept love. We in our world know that food is culturally an expression of love, no matter what culture you come from, right?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
So allow people to give you love. Let me give you in this time where things are just so fucked up, right? Can I please just give you this loaf of bread, right? And do that. People go, no, but the other people. Okay, I'll tell you what. Take that loaf of bread and give it to the people who are asking you for money when you stop at the red light. Or how about your neighbor? Or how about the community around you? Do you know a single mom that's feeding a whole bunch of teenagers? Please take this free food, right, and share it. Mm-hmm. And some people can go, to that. That gets them going. I was like, and lastly, this is food that is going into the waste stream if we don't make use of it. Mm-hmm. So what you are doing in doing that is directly supporting the environment, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's a permaculture principle, right?
Yep.
Stacking function, right? So find ways to line up being right with your individual self, right with the community. And, for me, sometimes it's my immediate family. Sometimes I define that as other Black folks. Mm-hmm. Sometimes if we're talking global stuff, that's the United States, whatever that zone is, right? And then there's that planetary part about our environment. Mm-hmm. And, I have to say, thank God for a pandemic in a lot of ways, right? Everybody wants to eat healthy. They want to grow their own fruits and vegetables. Mm-hmm. All the schools are trying to figure out how to take learning outside. That's right. A beautiful. We are learning to love one another. Mm-hmm. And, that's the work that I've been trying to do since before the pandemic. So I'm only hopeful about what's ahead of us, even though I know we got some ugly to go through still.
For sure. Another positive, to find a positive note on a dark thing, which is this pandemic, the amount of accessibility that's now available for people with disabilities who weren't allowed to work from home now. Now there's like this kind of veil that's lifted. It's like, oh, I see. You always could have done this. You were literally just making up reasons why we couldn't. But now we know that's bullshit.
Right. Right. So, and I don't know how much I buy into the conspiracy of oppression. Right. It happens. We need to think in new ways. Like now, here's another one. If you want to do good in the world, go and ensure that you're first taking care of those who need the most and then pull that net up. And in doing so, you got everybody else covered. So like in Berkeley, I don't know who did it. Some disability group sued Berkeley and said, you've got to cut out the sidewalks because it's an accessibility and ADA, right? Well, they went ahead and did it. Lo and behold, the bike riders love it. The mothers pushing strollers love it, right? So we take care of all of us when we first take care of the children, the infirm, the elderly,
it's the truth.
the unhoused, right?
That's the truth. I couldn't agree and echo with you enough, especially considering that the conversation of disability, when you look at how when we meet our organizing there to lift up, everybody is going to touch that conversation. Everybody who is alive is going to be disabled at some point in some way. And creating that like essential visual accommodative culture that essentially just says, we got you.
Right.
That's going to create better mental health as long as it's legitimately real, right? As long as it's not fabricated.
Right.
I mean, I feel like this is where the concept of rent abolition gets really exciting for me, because rent is probably one of the most arbitrary blocks that gets put in front of people for just being able to be present in society with autonomy, with agency, with creativity, freedom, and safety. You know, rent's a 30-day, fear reaction. It's a literal threat of violence. And that doesn't even involve having to really, restructure any buildings. That's a restructuring of our minds,
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you, since you said you're involved with food distribution for spreading the love and building bridges that way. You also said you're from Oakland. I was just kind of curious. I know that the Black Panthers had a chapter, like one of the main ones with Huey Newton.
Yeah.
So do they still do the breakfast or the free breakfast program there?
No. So first, let me just say, I have to say that I live in Berkeley because, and the East Bay is a conglomerate of a whole lot of places, but Oakland gets the claim and hold the Black Panthers and Huey and the house he lived in and the buildings in which they do all of that work are right there in my day to day. And honestly, quite a few Black Panthers are in my day to day because, they're still living here in Oakland.
Yeah.
We all often talk about replicating that feeding program. And I think there are all kinds of groups all over the Bay and all over the world that are trying to replicate that model.
Yeah.
But none like the Panthers. It's interesting when you're trying to do an all volunteer based program, right? Because you also want to reimburse people for what they do.
Yeah.
You want your volunteers not to be burned out.
Yep.
But we're in our organization now as we mature the organization and grow it up and work with foundations and offer legs up to other groups. We can't ignore the law to do that to you, right? So like one of the things we're struggling with is if we're working with the unhoused population and we want to pay them for doing that work, but we do need a W-9. We can't just pay them under the table, right? As your fiscal sponsor, we can't do that, right? Can we help the people to get those papers? Can we help them work through what their issues are around that, right? And there are plenty of sticky issues from immigration status to all kinds of things.
Yep. Felony status.
Yeah, all of that, right? But we got to figure out how to hold it both, right? and create win-win-wins for everybody and not let obstacles become
Insurmountable.
insurmountable. Exactly. And so, I wish we were all working more effectively together here in the Bay to do things like the children's feeding programs.
Yeah.
Right now, what my organization is seeking to do, and I think it's how I like to position myself as well. It's that bridge burner piece. And I use a sort of wagon wheel metaphor. You need to have a hub that holds the spokes. It helps them align, right, with one another to roll forward.
Were we not just talking about this last episode, guys? Tell me. Tell me you're seeing this happening. Tell me you're seeing this organic conversation emerge.
We're talking about the spokes council.
We're literally just talking about this, but from a different perspective last episode.
Yeah.
So, and the wheel, man, the wheel's where it's at. I don't fucking know what it is, but it's real. And all these different folks are talking about this wheel. And there's something really powerful to it. It's on the edge of my fascination with growing in community, basically.
It's growing community. It's growing a hub. It's growing a network. You can use the web metaphor, right? We're not trying to do any ladder metaphors, right?
No.
Trying to spread it all out this way.
The thing about a wheel, though, is that there's a specific physics that matters that translates to the metaphor, I think.
That's right. You know what it's called? Truing.
Huh?
It's called truing the wheel. And I only know that because a friend of mine put on Facebook this week that he was proud that he had trued his first bike wheel.
I get it. That's when you know the wheel has integrity. It can carry weight, right?
And it's balanced.
Right? That pressure. So the thinking, the postulating I've been doing around this, and then listening to others and just coming up with my own perspective and words just to understand it, is that the rim of the wheel is labor, right? Because that's the stuff that hits the road directly, right? The spokes are communication from everybody doing the labor, and then the hub is consensus. It's where everybody who's doing the labor is also the leader to whatever degree that they can be, to whatever degree that we can facilitate each other, right?
Yeah.
And right now we have this. The center of the wheel is the top of the pyramid in what we have now, right? And so, like, the power structure of a wheel, essentially, I think it becomes a sphere in the long run, right?
Huh. I mean, that's fun. Okay, so I've also likened it to a pie, right? So, and having all of the pieces to a pie. And when you do that organizationally, everybody actually has all their resources, but then you're multiplying those resources, right, at the focus of whatever the center of that hub is. So I seek to put my organization at the center of food, education, and the environment. And I'm looking to align with other organizations that are doing that work in all different kinds of ways, right? So that then, again, it's that raise all boats, right? But I'm loving that you stretched it to that almost like planetary level. I mean that, when we talk about helping the environment, you went beyond individuals or organizations, and I'm going to hold on to that for a long time.
Yeah. I appreciate that, because it's I feel like when the stress of the current paradigm, this arbitrary triangle that we're violently forced to organize as, it's hierarchies all the way down, and in that system, trauma is pushed down and access is pushed up, and we're getting to the point where the trauma is rising and rising and rising, and it's that emerges in contemporary conversations around conversations of middle class and stuff. I don't support the idea of a middle class personally. Like the idea of being like, we have a thriving middle class that's living on
They're
the,
going to be on the bottom still.
yeah, exactly. It's like, I don't really value that as a metric of success. But you can hear people talking about the middle class getting dissolved into the bottom and the 1%, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that when a certain level of trauma arises, there's no amount of legislation or policy that's going to be able to handle what's happening because of how many people are suffering on such a degree, right? And that is when people have skin in the game,
Got
right?
it.
And so the methodology of taking the spherical model is a way to be like, well, look, if this shit's going to fall apart, instead of killing each other, what if we facilitated it falling apart in a healthy, controlled fashion to take this and spin it so that we know it's going to lurch left and right a bunch. We know it's going to do that. So we work with that, and then we work towards making that a ball, essentially, where the power is not at the top, it's at the center. And then, and again, this is where I'm just going to have to live a lot more life and do a lot more work to fill in the gaps of that metaphor. But
Right.
that's the sound metaphor that I think is on like the tips of a lot of people's tongues and minds,
Yeah. My only challenge to you would be how much we have to work, that thing of work. Because, I find that when I don't try to control the outcome and just go with the flow and what organically builds out of that, right? Versus do any kind of imposition on work.
Right.
That, I said spirit has a wicked sense of humor and can bring people together in a network that like we couldn't have imagined anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
That's key.
Just letting it happen and trusting that it will, and playing your role in the game to the best of your ability, right? I first believe that the best thing I can do on being on this planet is be the best person I can be, and to be growing into that.
Every day.
Then being the model of that, right? And then, the shampoo, I don't know if y'all are old enough. There was the shampoo commercial that went and so on and so on and so on, right? And the people multiply and they multiply, and the whole effort or the organizations or the whatever, and that sphere you're talking about becomes this organic growing.
Exactly. I think it's where, if you look in nature, you can see what I'm talking about all over the place, where things gather. Even things that aren't as like neat and symmetrical as the idea of a platonic sphere. You look at like galaxies, slime molds, neural networks, they gather around nodes, right? And those nodes have context within the context of other things. And so...
Right. And some nodes have more connectors, and not in the value system, but just in the way that, those things go together, right? Or a generator. And I experienced myself as a node with a lot of generating tension, right? But I see it happening all around me. And again, I am only hopeful. I think this is an amazing time in our evolution, and it is an opportunity for us to have a really, that transition of all fall apart, to put it back together as what we know is right instead of what we've been.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree with you more. I have a very strong feeling that there's a window that we have access to right now.
Yes.
And it's not even open all the way yet.
Nope.
But when it is open all the way, it's not going to stay open all the way forever.
And it might not be open for everybody. I'm aiming to want to be one of the people that gets to transition through that and help build that work. In all this pandemic, a lot of people around me were very scared, especially the millennials who could understand the gravity, but, who like me go, I've lived most of my life anyway. Here, let's go for this ride, right?
Right.
And I just decided that I wasn't going to be fearful, and that ebb and flow and that that you described, to just ride with that.
Yep.
And not even try to dismantle patriarchy. And I didn't even do that much protesting, right? And I had been doing a lot up until then in the streets. Because I'm choosing to focus on making sure I have a body that can handle whatever is coming.
Right.
That I have gardens growing so that we will all be able to eat.
So good.
Right. And that we built community around that. And again, stacking functions. I'm in a garden. I'm getting the people in the garden. We build community. I had a work day yesterday at my school garden, and there must have been about 75 people that showed up.
That's
and we
awesome.
didn't advertise it.
That's
right.
awesome.
Because, pandemic and all. And people want this so bad.
Yes, they do. They're hungry for it. And it's popping up in places that, for me personally, I'm surprised. I'm surprised, not surprised. Like, I remember learning about what permaculture is a while ago, and I'm not educated. I'm not an expert, but just kind of getting it and being like, oh, wow, this is incredible. Yes. And yes, it applies to way more than just growing food.
Amen.
And knowing that, like, eventually this is gonna catch on. Like, the systems are gonna exhaust themselves that are unsustainable. And now it's giving me hope because I'm watching it pop up in the East, in the South. I'm watching it pop up around America, where it's like, ooh, okay, it's go time. Like, this stuff is spreading fast. And I kind of have this wager that you kind of can't get into permaculture and be an asshole, or like you can't, or like you
like to think
you can't see things as disconnected inherently if you're into permaculture. So when I say being an asshole, that's vague, but like if you are seeing where things are interconnected in the land, you're gonna see it everywhere. And I'm watching that change people. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I was taking up some space.
No. You finish. You had a little gap that I thought that you were done.
Oh no, I'm just saying that now is a good time to talk about this.
Oh, okay. Well, I was just gonna say to you, Wanda, I had this idea related to regarding the bridge building and permaculture, because I was kind of seeing permaculture as outside of just the ecosystem, but also the human aspect of the ecosystem.
Yeah.
So I had this idea for like getting these jugs or barrels, putting them in neighborhoods where people could then throw their food scraps, have some way of turning it over, checking the pH, whatever. But this could be what the community members can come in, fill it up, and then the school students could come in and, do all the maintenance, like adding in any buffers, stirring it up, whatever, to kind of get the whole community interconnected. Having the whole community connected to this garden, even if they're not directly planting, or, just so that they all put their blood, sweat, and tears into the garden as a whole community.
That's right. And not everybody's going to want to put their hands in the dirt. I mean, there's so many layers of what you just said, right?
Yeah.
But first of all, the garden as place, right? I was like, there's a young man that comes to our garden. He doesn't like to garden. He gives music lessons and guitar lessons to the kids, right? We've had African drummers show up, and, so like the kids go out there and they might just write about what they observe. So there's all kinds of ways and reasons to bring people into the gardens. But I love almost any kind of compost idea, right? Because there's let me say this. In terms of my favorite part of permaculture is the social permaculture piece, right? And if you can teach people to treat people like they do the plants, right? And grow people like we grow plants, right? And grow natural ecosystems like we grow ecosystems among people. And in fact, maybe see them as the same thing.
Yeah.
So that we're not these big bad humans up in it over top of this natural environment, right?
Right.
And then there's the learnings of permaculture, like valuing diversity of crops, right? Utilizing all of your resources. But the compost metaphors between, because my thing is, you can learn everything you need to know about life in a garden. Okay.
That's the first time I heard that.
Right? Look, you take compost and you take what is ugly and festering and moldy and slimy, and you put it away, and you bring out something that is not just rich and fertile, it is exactly the prescription for what the planet needs, right? Same thing for the people. I'm like, y'all, we can't keep just throwing these people under the freeway.
Exactly.
Right? Let's do something with that to take that horrible experience and flip it like compost, right? Into that. And to be true, the people there, they want to create a compost project because some of the food that gets recovered is not consumable, right, by human. So they can take all that slice of food, start building compost piles with it, and now you've got an entrepreneurial business that is also helping the planet, right? And we had to sit and go, okay, but wait, we don't want the compost to have all those particulates up underneath there, right? The freeways. But then somebody said, we can do them in greenhouses. We can do them in hoop houses, right? And how wonderful is that to not just have a solution, but then going, okay, what are we going to do for the people's health? Because if the compost can't handle it, what are we doing? And then we start addressing new issues in new ways, right? So using all those metaphors at the schools, the kids throw their lunches away at an alarming rate. Right?
Wow.
In part because we feed them bullshit food.
For sure.
Yeah.
But
like, what the hell is this crap?
Right. A lot of rice, a lot of bread, right? Noodles. Well, chickens love that stuff, right? So when you're trying to teach the kids, A, to recycle and why, right? And nobody, including the custodians, tend to do good jobs at even if you get the kids separating the garbage, the landfill, the recyclable, the organic, the custodial people will go and throw them all in the same bag, right? So you got this whole thing going. But if we get the kids pointed on separate out your organics, and then your class goes and feeds the chickens with it in the garden, right? Or this school over here, we don't have chickens, we got worms, right? Now you're not just, you're teaching them, you're changing the culture, right?
And that's so massive. That's just, you're changing the root code,
Exactly.
And I just got to say, I'm going to call it the hacker methodology, the hacking, right? I love the way that in everything that you're doing, you're talking about how can we find a way forward that is going across the assumed, right? And that's like bridge building, right?
Bridge building.
And I don't really feel confident to speak at length on that because I'm just like noticing it in your speak. It's all about, where can our perspective be shifted to reach through something, to create something that for whatever reason there was a preconceived notion or a boundary that maybe didn't need to be there from jump,
right?
Especially just to dovetail back because it's worth dovetailing on what the community gardening that you're doing does. That's so much more than just the food, right? Um,
An entire culture shift.
I mean, really, it's like
Wonderful.
it's education there. It's, because even when we're talking to each other, when kids are always learning. If kids are talking to people, they're learning, right? The amount of networking that happens when people get together, to me, like, it's like a really healthy sign of community when anybody in any community is able to get together and share food, love, and joy, right? Like that right there, you're like, and you see that pop up in places that are like just going through it, right? And in those places, you can see even more how precious they are, how precious the action of coming together is,
It saved my life in this pandemic. And there's probably 20, 25 people who became very committed to this school garden in the pandemic. And part of it was service and care of self. We were sitting around, we were being quarantined, but the first on the list of essential workers are agriculture workers, right? So we were like, oh, hell, we're going out. We were there almost every day. There were no little children to destroy all your work, I have to say. And we began to realize that it took everybody else a minute to get the vitamin D and that outside is good. But we knew it the whole time, right? And the serotonin and the dopamine that you get released when you got your hands in soil, when you're doing community, right? And go through it together was remarkable.
Rad.
Just so remarkable.
Rad.
Right.
Yeah. And there is no lack of space for this. That's the thing. That's what comes up for me. Living in Oakland and Berkeley for the time that I did, I'm pretty sure there's still big open plots of land that had never been used for a goddamn thing ever in like 15, 20 years, just sitting there barren. And I remember it just being at a point of frustration when I would pass those places and be like, why the hell? Like this place could be popping off with food and community right now. Like this space is just sitting there being used for nothing, So we don't lack anything to start pushing this like a wave of abundance into wherever we can. It's really fear. I think it's fear blockage. I think that's really a big part of it.
Right. And habit. I mean, I said to a school board member that came to the community group, I was like, you need to know that I'm going to start telling people about how these school grounds are public lands. Yeah. And I'm not sure why you all think it's okay to lock them.
Oh, I like where you're going with this.
Away from the community. Right. And he went, oh my God, I don't believe in that. I was like, all right. I was like, and then on top of it, you got Hill schools, right? Their schoolyards are open on the weekend. How come yours can't? Ours can't in the flatlands, right?
I've never considered that point.
Space right there. Rec centers and city parks, a whole nother load of space right there. But also what individual spaces can't be understated, right? Like I wish I had set up to be talking from my front yard, but I've got a fig, a pear, a plum, a cherry, an olive, a bay leaf, a pomegranate, a lime, and a lemon in a space that is not more than, and a perennial pepper that's organic, in a space that's, I don't know, way less than 500 square feet, right?
Nice.
Plus 6 garden beds. When we prioritize perennial plants, right? When we prioritize growing plants and native species rather than grass, you can find places to grow everywhere.
I agree.
Right.
I mean,
right.
It's a point of like, I have to not become depressed about this when I look around and see how much food isn't growing all over the place. That is, there's very little standing in the way other than in our own preconceived organizational motions,
And there's where I also have a little conspiracy. I was the executive director of People's Grocery for a minute. And the original founder of that organization wanted to start an actual grocery store.
Mhm.
And so he started shopping those parcels you describe all over Oakland. And and unfortunately didn't while the prices were rising. So like somebody would say, oh, I'll give you this for $1 million. He'd go raise the money. He'd get back 3 months later and like, you know what? That costs $3 million now, right?
Jesus.
Because it's crazy money. But what he really found out is that most of that barren land is held in international ownership.
For real.
And like he's mind-boggling. Primarily Asian, China, and Korea specifically, but also Eritrea.
Interesting.
Right.
Oh.
Ethiopia.
Huh.
Right. And so he was finding himself dealing with people who had no investment, moral investment, community investment, those lands. They were holding it just as real estate, right? And they didn't even necessarily need the money from that real estate.
That's
right.
So they just not very efficient.
Not just efficient. I mean, you want to talk takeover, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm putting it mildly, saying it wasn't very efficient.
Yeah. Right?
I mean, that's depressing as hell for me personally. Like, that's really...
No, it's real. It's scary. That's when I go, we need to be looking globally anyway and hope that's okay.
Is there a place to chat? Like, so we have so much, like, power in people showing up lately. Is that a realistic point of people showing up? Takeovers of vacant lots, turning them into community gardens. Like, that's a hard line right there that pushes something that's really powerful, and the risks of doing that are substantial. All the more reason to take something like that very seriously and what it would take to do, right?
And it's been done, and sometimes successfully. I've seen agreements where, you know, the landowner, I knew one, this guy happened to be Japanese, and he's like, all right, here's what you can do. Because the problem is when you want to come and get your land and go, okay, get off my land, I'm going to put a building up. Now everybody starts crying about all their community hours and sweat and tears, right? So if you can get really hardcore contracts around that, I have seen that done. I've seen them be taken over, right? Occupy the Farm was a group of people who took over land that was owned by UC Berkeley, right?
Yeah, that was the Gill Tract, right?
Very successfully so. That's Gill Tract, right? And it is, but, you know, probably, 12 years later, 15 years later, they're finally getting ready to like not have to sweat about being run off that land still. Right.
Yeah, they have been working with the university at great length, right? For quite some time. And so they're still going. They're about to hit an equilibrium, it sounds like.
Correct. And the university is now, believe the university has been building around them. They put up a very high-end senior living center with some commercial real estate right there, and the senior housing is for retired professors and that kind of thing. They're about to put up a 600-person dormitory, but they've come and agreed to do improvements for the farm as well, right?
So they're integrating it.
They're integrating it, and therein again is the win-win-win, right? Right. It doesn't mean that we beat down the university and we get everybody win-win.
Love it. That's building bridges, baby. That's right there. That's the bridge, right?
Baby.
Because that even though there's, you know, we can talk about nitpicking and there's reason to address details continually because there's so much information to be mined from how we can organize. But just looking at where it's at, given the level of work, like that's some people that literally took over a piece of land, and you know you're dealing with cops at that point.
Oh yeah.
So these are people that are putting their lives on the line, and that's not an exaggeration. That's not hyperbole, and there's no virtue to be signaled here. It's just skin in the fucking game. And the fact that people successfully did that, the fact that a learning institution, which is quite powerful, is building around that and integrating it. And this is where I got to cross my fingers. This is like faith shit, right?
Right.
That what happens is that what the farm is then
Right.
bleeds into the university instead of it being, because they didn't need the university from jump. The university insisted it needed to be there.
Right.
So
Right.
hopefully finding a way to have what that is, what that farm is, what it is from the community, change the nature of the university itself due to its proximity, right?
Amen.
There's so
And let me
much
just say
opportunity
that-
for that.
Right. That faith piece.
Mhm.
Now, that's my favorite thing that the garden teaches, right?
Tell me about it.
Especially for kids, right? Because
Mhm.
you got to take a little tiny seed, put it down in black, wet earth, right?
Uh-huh.
Water it for some period of time
Mhm.
and expect that anything is going to happen, much less, something you can eat, consume, and share with others, right?
Climb around on.
And climb around on faith, right?
Mhm.
Faith that like we could even grow a garden. When I started growing that garden, it was me and some kindergarten through 5th grade students.
Mm.
There were very few other adults, right? And we had faith that we could do it, right? Perseverance, right?
Mhm.
Teamwork,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
All of those, all those permaculture metaphors about creating a permanent culture in
Yes.
terms of our ecosystem and our environment
Mhm.
and our people in a fair share way is, I know that people hate, often it's a pretty hip thing now, with these white men package this permaculture thing and
Mhm.
culturally appropriated this and that and the other.
Yep.
I get it.
There's validity.
But man, is it a usable package?
It is. It's
Right.
older. It's old. It's so older than white people. It's no surprise that white people, being the dominant psyche that it is, would just jump on it to metabolize it into its
That's
whole
right.
vibe.
Package it up. That's right.
But it's you can't package it up
Yeah.
because the mechanisms of the packaging are the unsustainable thing. And the
Right.
principle of permaculture is you don't have to package shit if it's growing all around you.
It's just doing it.
Right? You don't need to,
Right.
and that's where on like a technical, like a techie level, you can't grow as much per foot of food with permaculture as you can with industrial farming. But you can integrate permaculture into every aspect of human fucking life.
That's right.
You don't have to
Harnessing
excise it,
resources.
right? So while you lose mass capacity, you increase access. And then, as you have already talked about way back in the conversation, the process of doing that creates other layers of culture on top of it, right?
Mhm.
Like you brought in music, right? Like people show up, start doing music around it. Like who doesn't like showing up for music? And if that's happening around the food that we're growing as a community together and meeting each other, that information exchange,
Yeah.
it is just win-win-win. So like one of the, the relatable, I think, experiences that might be able to be like reach out into an audience, if we're lucky enough to get an audience to listen to this in the first place, is we can look at things that are existing right now and they're real and be like, you can't deny that this is real. Can't deny that the Gill Tract Farm exists next to this giant monolithic institution, right? So perhaps getting used to that being real is a good first step, because sharing space is part of permaculture, is learning how things share space and how they affect each other.
Right.
So
Right.
I don't know, as we're kind of coming up on the end of this episode, unless you guys got a lot more steam, I feel like we got a lot. We generally go about an hour. I'm down to go longer if you like. But either way, I just wanted to, for me, bring to the forefront of the conversation that it seems like in the conversation of permaculture and bridge building, that sharing space is something that's very important to talk about.
Right. Well, and how you arrange space, right? In permaculture, we talk about how the wisdom and the learning that exists at the edges of things, right? And how planting in gill is helpful to the whole thriving of the planet. Right?
That's a seed. That's a seed.
That's that seed thing, right?
That
But
little
also what plants do well next to each other, right? And which ones need to be on another side of the garden. And generally speaking, if you let a garden grow like that, it will show you. And you will learn that we don't even have to, like, again, if you're just being your best self in the whole play and the whole theater of it, the rest, you don't even have to know how it ends up. You don't have to worry about how the other people play their roles. You do your role and be the best human you can be. Right.
Amen.
Right.
That kind of sounded like something Don said in our the podcast with the permaculture with him. He was speaking more in the context of food. Like he lets his garden do its thing, and it does all the work for itself instead of having to tend to the garden. But
That's right.
you expanded that to the social dimension.
Yeah.
So that's kind of,
that's the challenge in permaculture, right? And that's where I think humans can grow. Let's take what we know of the plants and the earth and also apply it to its people. And if we do that, we won't leave people with disabilities behind. Black lives will matter on the way to all lives mattering, right? And all of these, we're now getting to the point where there's so many categories, right? Just as we're like, okay, stop Asian hate, we're like, oh my God, they're jumping out of cars and whipping the Jewish people on the sidewalk, right? And it's pushing all of us to look at all this so that we can create that permanent culture.
Yep. I agree 1,000%. Thanks so much for being here and talking. And just like blessing us with this knowledge.
Y'all are pretty cool.
Man, thank you for the reflection. And I love you very much for saying that. And I love you very much for doing what you've been doing. I'm looking forward to when we put this out, lacing up this episode with plenty of links to what you're working on. Mama Wanda's, hold on, one of my technicians is.
How can we support?
Yeah. How can we support you?
How can you support me? Well, when I started gardening in my home garden, and it happens mostly to be in my front yard, there weren't a lot of other front yard gardens. And now all of the houses in every direction, I live on a corner, there are active gardens going. Everybody has chickens, and so I would ask first to help people grow the movement, right? By starting with yourself and starting where you're rooted and put some stuff in the ground or shepherd that little piece or get in a community garden. But, that wheel we were talking about moving forward, right? Let's fuel that with human intention, right? In doing that kind of work. Mama Wanda's Garden School is a wonderful little tool, and put it out there. It's very useful to kids. It's very useful to adults. Hopefully it will help forward this awareness, as well as, Michelle Obama created a puppet show for little kids. She even based it in Oakland for the first episode around healthy eating, and we premiered at the same time. And I'm like, damn, go figure. But I think it's that notion of great minds thinking alike, right? And what I'm doing here really does exist in all these other levels and planes of existence and geography, right? So everybody doing their part where they are is huge. And forwarding those notions. And I mean, my fundraisers on my board would go, did you not ask the people for money? Our organization is called Common Vision. If you want to support tree growing and school gardens and food recovery, sure, thank you very much. But I'm way more into our example and our intentions being multiplied.
Hell yeah. Boost each other. Boost
Let's
the
move.
vibe.
That's
Boost
right.
the vibes.
And then ending the monoculture.
Mm-hmm.
Right? No more monoculture.
Yeah.
Right.
We got to be like kudzu.
I've heard about kudzu.
Kudzu is the vine. It's an old anarchist trick I heard about. If you want to destabilize a building to bring down property values to stop gentrification, you plant kudzu around foundations, and it grows into foundations and breaks them apart.
Ooh, wee. That's a whole other conversation.
So if you want to make a place hard to clear for developers,
right,
you plant a bunch of kudzu, because then they have to spend they're probably going to level it anyways, but yeah, kudzu.
Yeah.
Kills buildings.
All right. So, yeah, hold other. I think there's a way to be a gentrifier. If you're going to be doing that, right? And my gardens are in places being swiftly, scarily gentrified.
Mm-hmm.
But let's learn how to live together. Let's create a win-win-win, right?
Yeah.
So, like, literally, Spirit sent a young man in my direction who wants to invest in the greening of West Oakland, and he lives directly across the street from my next school garden. And I do mean directly. So check it out. He can see it from his house.
I love it. Synchronicity.
And what that means is, I said, dude, I need your help, because here's the deal. Mm-hmm. 1, you're increasing your property value. Mm-hmm. 2, you're improving your view. 3, you are demonstrating your commitment to the community that you have chosen as your own. And you're even offsetting the impact. Because guess what? This little school, I can't get federal funding for it because the property around it all costs too much, right? Even though the kids that go to the actual school are poor.
Right.
Okay. So by supporting that school and how we do that so that we can really educate those kids, offsets his gentrificating footprint, right? In this hyper local way, right? And again, taking this horrible situation of gentrification and doing our best to create win-win-wins, right?
Word.
No matter who's living there, a garden right there is better for the planet, right? But if we support that school, you're building the community. And dude, you're helping yourself. That stacking function again.
That's really important. I think it's whoever will be listening to this and hopefully looking towards avoiding gentrification. If you do end up, being part of its perpetuation, this is one way that you can go about building the community rather than destroying it in the process.
That's right. Being a part of the community. In West Oakland, so folk, the big story is there's this church that goes back for generations on this corner, and the choir practices Tuesday at 7:30. And then the gentrifiers move in and they want to make it illegal for the church to be practicing at 7:30, right? Or the guys have stood on that corner for all their lives, and now because you live here, you don't think they should be able to loiter right there, right?
It's like the drumming on the lake too, right?
The drumming on the lake was a big thing, right? So I think it's, again, I think the short term, I understand the word gentrifying, but I think we got to start framing it as, how do we all live together? Right. And one of my things in the hood is I'm going to feed the people well so that the children have brains
fed brains
to be able to withstand, right? Because if you're a crackhead because you got turned off in school and all you ever ate is McDonald's, you and your whole lineage cannot resist the impact of gentrification.
Yeah.
Right? If we build these babies with strong minds and strong bodies and a community that loves them, they might not have to vent, right?
You're going to get less violence.
You're going to get less everything. You're going to get more love for everybody.
Love. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amen. More love.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, goddamn.
It's all in the garden, baby.
Hey, I'm not going to lie. That's the truth. I'm not going to stand in the way of that.
Yeah.
Mama Wanda's garden school.
Wanda's
You're about to take folks to school.
Yay.
Right on. Yeah, I look forward to when we get done with this, we're doing all our production stuff, trying to get this ready, to definitely having a nice chunk of text around things that you're involved in that people can focus on in.
Yeah.
Kind of amplify what you're doing, because
that's right.
Word.
It's really important. I'm excited. I can't wait to show my kids your channel. So because they've been talking about the garden, so now we at least have someone to teach us the ins and outs.
And it's people of all colors and cultures, and we take on one topic a month. So we had one on soil and compost and worms, and we have an ongoing character named Harriet Grubman. And Harriet Grubman is a worm, and she leads her underground movement of her people, right? To take what is festering, right, and make it valuable and fertile for the future.
So good. Nailed it.
I love it. That's like two different layers of history to be able to learn, you know?
That's right.
It's that hacker. That's that hacker.
And way more than two. We're about to take on pollination. And in the pollination one, we're going to talk about intersect, and not talk about it, but frame it as, guess what? There are people that have both body parts just like flowers.
You're hitting all these highlights. It's so
this
great.
Is awesome.
I actually just saw a meme earlier about how there's certain plants that are actually bisexual, that they can reproduce with both female and male plants.
That's right. That's right. Earthworms. Harriet Grubman, we actually were like, oh, we can have Harriet say, call me they, right? And that's totally legit on an earthworm.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Right?
That's awesome. Right. That's brilliant.
It's crazy, silly, right, and fun, and the grown-ups get it, and the kids are like, wow.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great way to, you know, put that little seed in their head, so that way, you know, later on, you know, there's not a confusion or, oh my goodness, I have to relearn everything. It's embedded in there. And then it's, you know, you're really breaking a lot of like these, you're breaking the dominant culture, and it's so exciting to me. I love it.
Right. And reframing, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Remix.
And roll forward.
Yeah. Just like the wagon wheel.
That wagon wheel. Yeah. There we go.
What else we got? We good? We good? We got more? I feel like we just got so much good stuff. I'm cool.
Yeah.
I'm kind of like I'm shaking from a lot of this.
Anything more? Maybe we could schedule another, time to meet over this discussion.
Love that.
Sure.
Honor.
And I love chatting.
Excellent.
And I like to ask questions and listen too. So
Congrats.
Invite me.
Well,
we would love to have you again.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be great.
Yeah. It would be good. All right. And Eugene, are you in Portland? No, you're in.
No. I'm right now. I'm recording in Oakland because I'm visiting, because I needed to get the hell out of Elk Grove, because that's where I live right now. And Elk Grove is a tiring place.
Yeah. Yeah. I drove through. It was a little bit scary.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not my atmosphere. It's not my. It's the opposite of what we're talking about with permaculture. I'm trying to get people I live with to be like, stop killing all the plants
It's like
everywhere for
HOA.
no reason. Just can you just stop killing all the plants for no reason? Let's just start there. Just stop angrily destroying all the plants around you, and maybe get to know them and what they're doing, and then see who we can introduce to them. It's a hard conversation because here's the thing, people are scared. They're literally scared, especially people who are vulnerable in any way to any number of social mores, right? Like there's neighborhoods, you try to start doing permaculture on instead of a lawn in Elk Grove, you're going to get someone rolling up trying to be like, look, we need to explain how things work around.
Oh, yeah. Alameda. That's right.
So like what we're working with, when we're talking about building bridges, we're building bridges into places where it's like iceberg, and we have to melt that shit. And the cool thing is that we can actually change climate with permaculture. Like I remember meeting a guy who was doing this work where they were finding the edges of deserts and seeing how they could use ecology and permaculture to push into the desert and basically start slowly extending out over the seasons into the desert. It's terraforming, it's slow terraforming. So the applications of these are tremendous worldwide. So let's definitely keep this conversation going.
Yeah,
I look forward to it.
All right, much love, y'all.
I love ya.
Much love.
Time.
Thank you, Wanda. Appreciate you.
Yes.
Thank you for everything you do.
Love it. Love the energy.
Bye.